before we start our own talks and questions and answers, and that is Giovanna Mingarelli, who is an entrepreneur, public speaker, and writer. She's on the global board. She is the global board chair for the non-religious, non-political organization Global Dignity, which empowers 1 million youth with dignity in 80 countries. I can't wait to hear more about that. She is also CEO and co-founder of MNC Consulting and M2C. And she will be giving us her thoughts, and then we can also raise questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I'm so delighted to be here, very much honored and privileged to be with all of you, and also to my fellow speakers. Thank you so very much for your views. I am, again, delighted to be joining you from Ottawa, Canada, this morning, evening, or afternoon, wherever you are, as part of this closing ceremony. And I wanted to just take the opportunity to thank the organizers of the Nizami Ganjavi International Centre for organizing this Young Leaders Forum. Before I get into my own remarks, I want to just summarize briefly what's been discussed this morning. So first, we know the world needs inclusive economic growth where no one is left behind, and ensuring social connection and diversity to enable that end. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for sharing these views, amongst many others. This is juxtaposed on a world stage that is a mess. There's no other way of putting it bluntly, where systems are overwhelmed, cooperation is fragile, and COVID has disoriented people. We need to focus on the SDG goals we have set and to not delay our plans, and we need goodwill and some common sense in having good neighborly relations. And thank you, Dr. Sachs, for that. So this week, we've explored topics ranging from the future of jobs and skills development to the role of young leaders in addressing reform. The platform for these conversations wouldn't have been possible without the Azerbaijani national poet Nizami Ganjavi, to whom I'd like to express my deepest regards and respect. I believe that Nizami Ganjavi is not only a national poet of Azerbaijan, but in the truest sense, he is a poet of youth and a poet of humanity too. For those of you who are not familiar with him, Nizami Ganjavi was an 11th century poet who inspired romanticism in Europe and the world. For example, the great pioneers of romanticism in Europe, including John Keats, William Wordsworth, Mary Shelley, and Shakespeare, all received their inspiration from Nizami Ganjavi's philosophy. Today, in these closing remarks, I believe we can identify great wisdom from his romanticism and philosophy, where we're inspired to make the world more beautiful. We're looking for economic growth, opportunity, excellence, and sustainability for everyone and for future generations. I mentioned Nizami Ganjavi's work as these ideals underpin the policies and practices that we need and must achieve with the Sustainable Development Goals today. My basic message, and the most important message that I believe I would like to share with all of you, and given also, Mr. Prime Minister, your remarks and those of Dr. Sachs, is that the world needs trust. We cannot have inclusive growth without trust between people, communities, countries, and regions. We cannot progress on sustainable development goals. We cannot advance gender equality. We cannot lead to more inclusive communities if we do not have trust. Trust is the basic social fabric that enables the conversations to happen in the boardrooms, in parliament, in democratic institutions around the world, that allows us to build the policies, the best practices, and to move forward and build the conditions and the environments for greater collaboration, greater cohesion, and greater social acceptance of activities such as the Sustainable Development Goals. Leadership, when rooted in Nizami Ganjavi's vision, would be based on qualities of love, care, responsibility, tolerance, and dignity. All of these qualities both enable and can result in more trusting relationships and outcomes to accomplish the urgent SDG goals that we are endeavoring to accomplish and that we're discussing today. And in the words of Dr. Sachs, if we cannot talk to each other sensibly, in brief, we can't get anything done. In closing, Nizami Ganjavi can support us in addressing global crises, which can, and I believe must, be sustainably resolved through trust, dignity, love, and mutual understanding. Thank you so much.
Sorry, that took me a second to. For example, Ross, what is your question?
Thank you so much. My question is from the inspiring lady, Madame Giovanna Mingarelli. I have had the opportunity to listen to your excellent reflections on digital democracy. Based on your knowledge, what are the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation behind the increasingly digital empowered and equipped millennial generation? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ross, for your question. So the millennial generation is a very, very inspiring generation. So these are people between the ages of 18 and 35 who, in general, are statistically considered to be the most active change makers in society. According to a recent McCann World Group study, millennials were the most likely group to take action for themselves, an organization, or cause that they care about, given the right tools. Millennials, to this effect, I believe, can also have tremendous impact on democracies and in transforming society in a collaborative way. I myself am a millennial. I'm actually the oldest possible millennial. So I'm now 37. They do not get older than me. So, you know, but I think we are all generally in the same demographic. And so functionally speaking, you know, millennials really believe in trust, collaboration, authenticity, and transparency. These are all subjects that we've talked about today and that we've explored, that Dr. Sachs and you know, the former Prime Minister spoke about quite a bit. And I really like the comment as well that we have to stay optimistic and positive, because the fact is that the world is a mess, and there are a lot of problems across the board. But millennials, again, can be very optimistic, and I think it's important that we use the tools that we have and the great numbers that we are, right, to a positive effect, right, and to use our entrepreneurialism and you know, our voices to change the policies, to change the structures in society as we wish them to be seen. You know, one way we can do this, again, is through running for office. There are an increasingly number of young leaders that we're seeing in public office. I think that's an excellent way for millennials to contribute. Another way is to found companies that support the SDGs. You know, for example, the organization based out of Seattle, Women in Cloud, is bringing $1 billion of economic access to women-led STEM companies by 2030. I'm an advisor to this organization, and they're a partner of UN Women. So this is another way that you know, our group can contribute to SDGs and to fulfilling the goals that we're trying to see in the world. And so I hope that helps. I'm happy to share more, but thank you so much for your question.
Okay, thank you. I have a question from Uma Devi, and then we'll go on with our list.
Thank you, Madam, for this. My question is to Madam Giovanna. Is she here? Are you hearing me?
I am. I'm excited for your question.
Great. So I myself are intrigued with the performing arts. The Caribbean culture, a lot of our music speak about lessons that can be learned in society, with our songs that we put out there and our poems, etc. My question to you is why the performing art, music, and romanticism is missing in today's global development agenda, and how can we incorporate them?
This is a very good question. Thank you so much for asking. Yes. You know, it's a funny thing. I feel like in our desire to be constantly efficient, and you know, the very kind of industrial societies that we run, and the basic function of capitalist society is to produce and to be hyper efficient at that production. And that production generally does not involve a lot of time and space for people to enjoy the arts, right? Like it is actually the rare few who have the opportunity to actually go and experience the fine arts in the midst of the social constructs that we've created, which again is hyper efficiency with the goal of creating greater production. And so I think, you know, what we're seeing now with the emergence of various social platforms where people are able to be more self-expressive, you know, Facebook, Instagram, except, you know, TikTok, right? All this user-generated content. We now have more of an opportunity for people to share the arts in the way that is available to them and on their own timelines. Professor at NYU, Clay Shirky, who's one of the forefathers of social networking, calls this a cognitive surplus. Basically, before World War II, society had essentially far less time to actually engage in and consume any kind of leisurely activity, including the arts. Since then, you know, we've actually had a lot more time and space. And so we're actually seeing the integration now of the arts in a more mainstream way. And I think actually that the function of social and digital media will actually enable the arts to be more popularized and more mainstream and more accessible by virtue of the function that, you know, we can, like anyone with a phone can access the arts. And so all of this to say is, I think that the system that we live in, right, has just not necessarily highlighted the need for beauty and the need for arts and the need for culture and poetry in a deeply mainstream sense, because it's not really how society was set up. But I do believe that people are increasingly more engaged with it. And I think that there's the whole work-life balance narrative and people starting to understand in a post-COVID context that we can no longer push ourselves to such extremes because it's unhealthy and it will have very serious negative effects on people's lives, whether that be for work or socially, is no longer acceptable. And I think in this context, in the post-COVID world, I believe that combined with the enabling factors of social networking, that the arts will become much more seriously integrated into society in a more mainstream sense where people can relax and enjoy it more.
Thank you. Thank you. May I ask